Hey guys, Dotaran here, back with another Last Epoch video. So today I'm going to break down for you my take on Smite Void Knight. So we did a Paladin Smite build, which I'll link in the description down below if you want to see that one. This is a Void Knight version where you use Smite. Instead of dealing lightning damage, our Smite will be dealing void damage. Now, contrary to Smite Paladin will be stacking Attunement for more damage, because Paladins are based off of Attunement. Whereas the Void Knight, for Smite Void Knight specifically, will be stacking Vitality. So as we gain more Vitality, each point of Vitality, which naturally gives us 6 health and 1% poison and necrotic resist, there's a special passive in the Void Knight passive tree, which will grant 1 spell damage per point of Vitality as well. So as we spec into the Smite version, we'll be more tanky because we're getting more health, whilst also dealing a lot of damage as well. Now, the beauty of this build is that it's very easy to build, and it does well in all general content. That being said, due to the fact that this build doesn't use ward, don't expect this build to go into the 1000, 2000 corruption levels. Although this build is very strong, so it is capable of doing plus 300 corruption levels. And as I said, it's very easy to spec for. There's no specific build requirements or gear pieces that you need for this build. Let's quickly talk about the gearing first. So on your gear pieces, the prefixes that you're looking for is Vitality and Void damage and Spell Void damage. So you can see here on my chest piece, I have Vitality with increased Void damage and Spell damage. These particular affixes are really good. On my helmet, I also have plus 50% increased void damage and spell damage. So you want to get this hybrid affix if you can. If you can't, just get increased void damage. And also, if you can get spell damage, that's also really good as well. Now, on your wand and other pieces of gear that you can, you also want to get cast speed as well. Cast speed is really good because Smite is a spell and it specs off of cast speed. This means that you'll be casting your smites really quickly. Now, in my particular version, I have opted to, instead of using a staff like other Void Knights, I use a wand and I dual wield a sword. Now, the reason why I use this sword is because of 2 reasons. This sword gives me spell damage, it gives me increased void damage, and it gives me cast speed. So this sword is really good because it gives us all the stats we want in this build. The second reason I use a sword is because in the Sentinel tree, we have the Blade Master passive. Blade Master gives us increased 30% sword attack and cast speed. So naturally, you want to dual wield. So you want to take Gladiator for the dual wield, and then we spec into Blade Master for increased attack speed. This makes us attack really quickly. That being said, because you're using a sword, you are missing out on the defensive component of using a shield. So if you do opt into a shield, then I would suggest you can spec into the passive tree of Paladin and pick up Heavenfire, which gives you spell damage with the shield. This will give you up to 30 spell damage with a shield. But you do have to invest quite a few points into this tree to get it. It's up to you in terms of how you want to spec. We'll go over the passives a little bit later, but just note that this option is there if you want to use a shield. Otherwise, I have seen other Void Knights use staffs as well. But the only thing with staffs is I don't find that there's any support for staffs in the Sentinel tree at all, which is why I don't specifically use a staff. So the main things for your damage, you want Vitality. Vitality will be increasing the spell damage. The reason being is because in the Void Knight tree, we have this tree here, this point, Temporal Corruption. Your spells and attacks deal additional void damage, and Smite's base damage is converted to void. So this will turn Smite into a void spell. Additionally, we have Renouncement. These 5 points give you Vitality and also makes it so that your Smite scales off of Vitality instead of Attunement. Paladins naturally will be building Attunement to increase your Smite damage. In the case of Void Knight, we use Vitality instead. This means all pieces of gear will want to have Vitality on it. You can see the implicit, I've got plus 2 Vitality on this helm. Now, you can get Vitality separately, but The reason why I didn't was because I thought +4 to volatile reversal was too good, because it gives us +4, plus it gives us 100% increased void damage. So that's up to you. Whether or not you want the increased void damage or the vitality is really up to you. Then we have the +17 vitality on the chest piece with the increased void damage as well. I thought these two pieces were really good, so I kept them in the build. Then we have the amulet. I got cast speed, void damage, and void penetration. Now this isn't the best amulet, but it does give us everything we want on it, so that's why I opted to use this amulet, because it does give us void damage in the form of cast speed and void penetration. Then we're using a wand, and the reason why we're using the wand, again, implicit has increased cast speed with extra cast speed and spell damage, all the things that will increase your Void Smite damage. So again, vitality and void damage are the two most important things you want in the build. That will help you increase the damage of your smite. With the idols, I've opted to go for all of the idols that give us vitality, as well as additional things like resistance and chance to shred armor. So again, stacking as much vitality as possible, meaning that our smite will just deal a ton of damage, because the scaling tags say void, spell, and vitality. And again, with your defensive suffixes, you want all of the normal, traditional defensive suffixes. So Sentinel specifically, they spec very well into armor and health. So you want health, hybrid health, resistances, cap out your resistances, get as much health as possible, and stack as much armor as possible as well. Alright, let's quickly talk about the skills. There will be a build planner in the description down below. Check out the description to see my build planner. But most important thing for Smite, because we're using Smite as a void skill, we can't use it to spec into lightning, and we can't use it to spec into fire. Instead, we're just picking up all of the more damage modifiers for Smite. So for instance, we have Blinding Flash. This gives us a chance to blind enemies. On top of the chance to blind enemies, this will give us increased damage to blinded enemies. We have a chance to double cast Smite. Pillars of Light is very important for this build, because essentially you're casting a Smite for free. Then we have Sacrifice. This is probably the most important node on this tree. Sacrifice makes it so that you deal 2.5 times more damage, but you're going to consume a bit of your health to do that. Then we go down into the Attunement node. This will make it so that Sacrifice doesn't consume as much health. So normally it consumes about 15% of your health. This will make it so that it consumes 80% less. Now you can get more nodes into Smite. So if you can get +4 into Smite, you can actually pick up the last node to make it so that Sacrifice doesn't consume any health, and perhaps put more points into Blinding Flash, or put more points into Conflagration. Conflagration makes it so that you apply Ignite, and then you deal more damage to ignited enemies as well. So these are the nodes that we're picking up in Smite. Now, before I continue going to the skills, one thing to note is that this build is not just a Smite build. I'm actually using Devouring Orb and Anomaly, and so this is like the traditional auto bomber build. The Devouring Orb is really good for clearing out all of the trash mobs, and then you use Smite on single targets. So essentially we have Devouring Orbs that clear out all of the enemies, normally all the weaker enemies. Then for a single target, we can burst down using Smite. Because of our increased cast speed, we just cast Smite really quickly on one target and just kill them as fast as possible. So that's how this particular build works. So for Anomaly, the most important nodes are all in the right section. We're completely avoiding the left section here. And one of the things that really help is this Time Bubble. Time Bubble makes it so that we shred void resistance so that we can deal more damage. Obviously, with Anomaly, because of the Time Bubble, we're going to be in melee range, and we're doing that because we're picking up a node where Time Bubble is cast on you and it moves around with you. We also have it so that we basically buff ourselves whilst we have the Time Bubble on. So for instance, the Time Bubble increases our cast speed, Time Bubble will increase our cooldown reduction, and the Time Bubble will also increase our crit chance as well. So this Anomaly is basically just a buff on yourself, kind of like Holy Aura for Paladin. Then we have Volatile Reversal. Now, I do have +4 to Volatile Reversal, but I purposely didn't put points into here just to show you how to spec into this tree. So, with Volatile Reversal, we're picking up, again, all of the nodes that buff yourself. So you want to pick up increased cast speed, increased move speed. You also want to get Harbinger of Dust. This will make so that enemies hit by your Volatile Reversal will take increased damage. So this is a +20% multiplier. We also have Time Rifts as well. This will make it so that they take increased damage over time. So if you can get this warped time for increased cast speed and move speed with Harbinger of Dust, that's really good. You can kind of maybe avoid this section because you don't need this as much, but you do really want the Harbinger of Dust. 3 points into there and 3 points into warp time as well. I've also picked up these 2 nodes for increased cooldown reduction, but it makes it so that we don't gain back health and we don't get back mana as well. Now, Devouring Orb is the auto bomber part of this particular build. We're speccing it so that Devouring Orb will orbit around us, and whilst we have a Devouring Orb up, we get increased attack speed and cast speed. We also make it so that our Devouring Orbs will deal more damage as it collides with enemies as well. So again, we're using the auto bomber part of this particular build. In this case here though, Lunge is probably the best bet to go with, simply because with Lunge is kind of necessary for this build, and the reason why is because we're using the auto bomber setup. The auto bomber does the best damage when you're in melee range, and Lunge will automatically dash you to the nearest enemy. So when you have the auto bombers orbiting around you, essentially you just lunge to the next target and your bombs will kind of just target the next enemy. So Lunge is probably the best thing to spec into. So on my skill bar here, we have Devouring Orbs for the trash mob clearing auto bomber setup. Then we have Anomaly, which is a buff. Now this is on an 8-second cooldown. Actually, the way I've specced into it and with the amount of cooldown reduction I have in my gear, I can have this on infinitely. So it's an 8-second cooldown which lasts for 5 seconds, but this actually the amount of cooldown I actually have means that I have this up constantly. Then we have Unspecced Lunge, Volatile Reversal, and Smite. So Smite is our single target damage killer. We have Devouring Orb as our wave clearing. So general skill rotation, you're constantly basically using Devouring Orb, just summoning as many Devouring Orbs as possible. You can see I have like 5, 6 up at a time. And then if you do encounter an enemy, your rotation will basically be to Smite and then Volatile Reversal for the increased attack speed and just cast Smite as quickly as possible to kill them. Now going into the passives, again, description is in the build planner down below, but the most important nodes is because the fact I'm using a sword, you need to make sure you have dual wield on with Gladiator, so you can equip the sword in your offhand, and then with the sword you have the option to go into Blade Master, which will make it so that your sword attack and cast speed is 30% faster. Then with the rest of the points, we basically put them all into the Void Knight tree. Now the reason why we've put it all into the Void Knight tree, one of the reasons is because of this node here, Void Corruption. Void Corruption makes it so that every additional point I spend in the Void Knight tree gives us 1% more crit multiplier, which means with 75 points I have 75% multiplier for crit. All the other nodes in this tree is basically just to increase your void damage and your void spell damage. So make sure that when you're looking in this tree, you make sure that you're looking at all the spell nodes, because there's a lot of void melee or void throwing damage nodes. So make sure that I've got spell listed up here, so I'm picking up all of the nodes where it increases my spell void damage here. This is Echo Chance. As part of the Void Knight's passive bonus, your melee attacks and void spells have a 10% chance to be repeated by Echo. This means that it basically has another chance to cast again. So with this particular node, this gives us 10% increased chance, meaning 10 plus 10 is 20, and then we have another 10% chance here, so 30% chance to echo, essentially double your damage because you're casting the skill again. And because we're playing a vitality based smite based build, don't skip out on the Eternal Form node, which gives us 10 vitality, and 20% increased health as well. So this is just free health and damage that you get from the Void Knight passive. We've also got Void Damage Life Leech as well. So we've got 2% Void Damage Leech, meaning that as we cast Smite really quickly, we're gaining our health back in the form of Lifesteal. And that's it for my quick look on Smite Void Knight. If you enjoyed the video, please drop me a like down below and subscribe to the channel. As always, have an awesome day. Bye for now.